Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bracy Sports Media. My name is Aaron Bracy, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Tom McCarthy. Besides being the Philadelphia Phillies TV broadcaster, announcing college football, college basketball, and the NFL for Westwood One and the NFL on CBS, Tom is just a really good guy. Tom, thanks so much for joining us here today on Bracy Sports Media.
Well, Aaron, I appreciate it. It's nice to be here. You and I have known each other for a long time. You had hair and I had hair when we first met, so that's a long time ago.
That's true. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, you can also access this interview on our Bracy Sports Media podcast by downloading and subscribing wherever you get your podcast. And if you're listening on our podcast, you can watch this interview on our Bracy Sports Media YouTube channel. Finally, please be sure to check out our website, bracysportsmedia.com. All right, Tom, let's get right into it. You mentioned we've known each other for a long time, and I thought we could talk about the fall of 1999, which was a bit of a career crossroads for you. You had worked for the Trenton Thunder for 6 years, and you were kind of weighing whether to continue in the direction of kind of overseeing a team or whether to kind of continue on with broadcasting. What do you remember about that time, and why did you decide to continue on with broadcasting?
Well, what I remember about that time is that we were really successful in Trenton. We were selling out every single night. It's still a great place to go. But we were still in our heyday. We had opened in 1994, and I had never done anything in minor league baseball except for announcing a couple of games down in Charleston, just because I called the announcer and said, "Hey, I'd like to see how you do a game," and he gave me the microphone and let me call some games, which was kind of funny back in '93. But in '99, we were still rolling pretty good in Trenton, and I was the assistant general manager, but also I was doing the radio and the TV. And our ownership group had asked me if I would be interested in running a new minor league team that they were putting together. And I had said yes, because it was good money. It was close to where I live, and it was a pretty solid operation. And I was driving to go sign the papers, and I called our owner, Joe Findlay, and I said, "Joe, I'm having second thoughts." And he said, "Listen, we want you to broadcast as long as you can broadcast. So if you're having second thoughts, it's fine." I had been told by somebody from CN8, John Anderson, who was a great guy, one of our directors. He said, there's a lot of people that are interested in using you as a broadcaster, but they don't know what you are. They don't know if you're a broadcaster or if you're an administrator. And I said, "Well, I'm both." And they said, "Can't be both." And I was like, "Yeah, I can. I've been both forever." As it turns out, I probably could have kept doing both, but I just decided that it was time to just concentrate on being a broadcaster. So I turned down the president's position for a minor league team, and it was the third one that I had been offered. I turned that down and decided to even resign as the assistant GM and just focus on being a broadcaster. So, my wife, who I've been married to for since 1993, she's unbelievable. I called her and told her my plans while I was driving, and she said, "That's fine. Just make sure you pick up milk tonight," because both boys were growing at that point. The boys need milk. So that was it. That's how I decided to leave the Thunder. I still broadcasted the games, but then I took a job as a broadcaster doing an afternoon drive radio show.
Well, that's where you and our relationship kind of started, because you were doing an afternoon show on 1680 out of Princeton, and I was covering the Trenton Shooting Stars for the Trenton Times, and I believe the Shooting Stars were broadcast on your station, and you would have me on occasionally to talk about the Shooting Stars before you started doing any baseball or anything. But what do you remember about that summer or that year, 2000, and did you feel like at that time while you're doing your show, like, hey, I think I made a pretty good decision here, that this is really where my heart is?
I didn't know if I did. I did have buyer's remorse, and I think a lot of us do when we, go on to a different organization or a different career. So I wasn't sure. I loved doing the radio show. I did. You speak of the Shooting Stars, that was one of the other positions that I was offered. I was offered the presidency of that when it first began. And I just didn't have a feeling that it was something I wanted to continue to do. But the show I loved, but I was still torn because, the stability of running a minor league baseball team, and I knew what the plan was for the new one, was going to be great for my family. So I loved it. I was still apprehensive, but man, I loved doing a 3-hour show. The great thing about it is that Len Weiner, who used to run ESPN Nationals from Rutgers University, and he came down because Rutgers was doing a story on him and he needed B-roll. and he was in our office, and he said to me, he said, "Can you do an open?" This was 11 o'clock in the morning. "Can you do an open so we can use it for B-roll?" And I was like, I had just gotten there. I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I did this blind open just in front of a microphone, acting like I was doing my talk show, which wasn't starting for another 5 hours. And he was so impressed that he hired me to do stuff at ESPN Radio nationally. So
Wow.
This office that you're seeing right now was a studio in my house. I basically broadcast from here. And then eventually, the Phillies had heard my show, and Scott Graham knew that I had done play-by-play, and they were looking for a pre- and post-game host, and it kind of took off from there.
Tom McCarthy, Phillies broadcaster, joining us here on Bracy Sports Media. You can hear Tom daily on his 10 Minutes with T-Mac on the Phillies YouTube channel, and also catch his simulation games on Saturdays on NBC Sports Philly. Tom, I do want to get to the Phillies, but I'd like to tell our listeners about your background, because it's an extremely interesting story. You started out in college as a biology major. I think you even took like a dental test or something. But you always loved baseball. You always loved broadcasting. And could you take the story from there?
Yeah, so just to make it really quick, I had no idea what I wanted to do for a living. I went to school to play baseball. That was my one objective. I had no other interest in doing anything else. I had a really good academic record in high school. I was ranked in the top 20 in my class, but I still was going to play baseball. I still thought I could play professional baseball. So I decided to go to the College of New Jersey, and out of the 7 schools I applied to, I was a different major at all of them. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. It just so happened that at the College of New Jersey, I was a biology major, and I was a really, really bad biology major. So I got cut from the baseball team and was shocked, totally shocked, blindsided by it. It happens. And I was going to transfer, actually. I was going to transfer to Montclair, where I was a communications and television major. They hadn't started yet, and I decided not to. So I stayed at the College of New Jersey. And to kind of get my sports fix, I started writing for a local weekly newspaper within a couple of months, and then eventually went to the Trenton Times, which was awesome. And then eventually that led to doing some radio and TV, and I stopped being a biology major in the middle of my junior year, much to the delight of everybody in the biology department. But I went back to get my master's in teaching biology, chemistry, and physics, and that's when I eventually, because I wanted to go to medical school. That was my thought when I was in school. But I just didn't have the grades. So I went back to get my master's. I had a 4.0 as a master's student, teaching biology, chemistry, and physics. And then I took the medical school exams. I needed a 15, and I got a 16 on it, which I shouldn't have. I don't know how I did it. Anyway, I never went up going to medical school, but I did take the exams.
And then you began writing a little bit more for the Trenton Times after you graduated. You began covering the Phillies. You still had that itch to broadcast. And interestingly, it was a couple of Philadelphia writers and broadcasters you kind of got an experience with, doing a show with Mark Narducci and Big Daddy Graham. What do you remember about those shows and how they kind of scratched that itch you had?
Well, so Big Daddy Graham was really funny. He was trying to get into radio, and he was at WTTM hosting a morning show, and he needed somebody to do sports updates. So they hired me to do it. I got like, I guess, $50 a day to do it or something like that. It was something really little. But I had been doing some high school and college stuff for WTTM. And he called me the sports moron because he said that he never met anybody that knew the dopiest things about sports other than me, which is, turns out, as I've told him time and time again, he has taken over that moniker on his overnight show on WIP. He was great. He was funny like he is now. He was great. Mark Narducci did a high school sports show every week, and I would be a guest every once in a while. And that was when I was a guest one time. Tom Bigby, who was running WIP, told me that I had a great voice and I should think about doing this for a living. And I was like, okay. So I did. That's when I started broadcasting high school and college games, and eventually the College of New Jersey football games. I was the color commentator. And one thing kind of led to another. My boss at the Trenton Times was awesome, Jim Gauger and Phil Coffey and Bill Kennedy. They let me write the game stories for these things and then broadcast them as well. So I would make, sort of double the money, which was great when you start in a family.
And then you put together some baseball tape. One, you mentioned going to Charleston with a gentleman named Rick Jablonski. And then also you broadcast the 1993 Babe Ruth World Series at Moody Park in Ewing. And those experiences gave you a tape that you needed to get to the Thunder. What do you remember about those experiences?
Well, I remember Willie Mays was there, and he was supposed to come on as a guest for one of them, and he wouldn't do it. He was 3 feet behind me sitting in the press box at Moody Park, and he just wouldn't come on. It was really funny. But what I remember about that is that I had no idea what I was really doing, but I had basically purchased the time on WTTM in Trenton. And there was a gentleman by the name of Bob Dorio, who was a banker in Ewing, who I really haven't talked to much since, but he just kind of gave me the keys to the whole tournament. So we bought the time, we sold it to all the different cities, and I wound up doing a majority of the games with Rick Freeman, a good friend of mine who was a teacher at Steinert High School and was a former college baseball coach. And it was awesome. We would broadcast the games all around the country, and the reaction was great. The tapes were really good, I thought, and I used those and what I did in Charleston, South Carolina, to get the Thunder job, which I don't know how I got the Thunder job, but it changed my life.
Tom McCarthy, Phillies broadcaster, joining us here on Bracy Sports Media. All right, Tom, the Thunder were starting in 1994 in Trenton, and you became their first broadcaster and also their, I guess, PR director.
Right.
When you actually got the keys to that job and put the headset on for that first game in 1994, were you pinching yourself? What do you remember about that experience?
I remember that our stadium wasn't done, and many of our home games were played at the Vet and at the Blue Rock Stadium in Wilmington and even in Reading, Pennsylvania. But remember the first game, we really didn't know what we were doing. Nick Simonetta and I were in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and we were broadcasting a game. And I remember it being a beautiful night. The sun was blasting in this press box that was kind of like a college press box. But I was pinching myself, and it was unbelievable that this team, because Aaron, I was going to go to the winter meetings to get a job, try to get a job in baseball. But this one came, I lived 10 minutes from the stadium. And that's the thing I've been fortunate about. I haven't had to move. I'm in the same house I've been in for 22 years. I've been basically in this area since I was in college. So that's where I pinched myself, that I didn't have to uproot my family, because I was starting a family at that point. Meg and I had been married for about a year. Patrick was born in 95. So it was kind of, it was kind of a blessing that it came. But I remember pinching myself because I was like, man, I'm actually doing this and I'm getting paid to do this. I made $26,000 a year doing the Trenton Thunder games. Then I sold some stuff. Didn't sell much. I wasn't a very good salesman at the beginning. I really wasn't a very good salesman even when I was the assistant GM, but I had some pretty good clients. Gotcha. Anyway, I made money that was pretty cool, and it was exciting.
Tom McCarthy, Phillies broadcaster, joining us here on Bracy Sports Media. All right, Tom, so you were at the Thunder for 6 years, and you finally got your break with the Phillies in the fall of 2000. How did that come about?
So Scott Graham was doing the games, and Scott had done some stuff on CN8, and I had done some stuff with him. I was the sideline reporter, and I also had done some games on, some Thunder games as well on CN8. So we kind of knew each other just because we crossed paths. And he was ascending into the play-by-play chair, and they needed somebody to do the pre- and post-game show. So they had tryouts in September, and they asked if I would do it. Rory McNeil had heard my talk show in September of 2000, and he also heard my play-by-play because I had sent him tapes all the time. And at that point, I had turned down the Tampa Bay Devil Rays job. I had turned down a chance to go to AAA twice, and I had turned down the chance to I was a finalist for the Milwaukee Bucks job too, radio job.
Oh, wow.
But Meg didn't want to move, which, listen, I mean, we had 2 young kids. We were about to have our third child in a few months. I got it. I understood. As it turned out, she was smarter than I was when it came to this stuff. Anyway, I tried out for the Phillies pre- and post-game show. One night, it was the Emmy Awards that were going on, the Mid-Atlantic Emmy Awards, and I was up for it for play-by-play and for our broadcast of Thunder games. I didn't think
you ended up winning it, by the way.
I didn't think I was going to win, but I was supposed to fill in that night at the Phillies because the guys were going to the awards. Scott was going to the awards. Harry was going to the awards. So I didn't tell anybody that I was up for anything. And in the post-game show, I felt something over my shoulder, and I kind of looked as I went into a break, and it was Rory McNeil, and he was sitting there like this. And he had this stern look on his face, and I'm thinking, what the hell did I do? So as we got into the break, he said, why didn't you tell me that you're up for an Emmy Award? I said, because it's not a big deal. He goes, well, it is. The Emmy Awards were tonight. I said, yeah, I know. He said, well, you should have been there. I said, I'd rather be here. He said, well, you should have been there. You won. Your CN8 won for your Thunder broadcasts. Sean Spurry was our producer. John Anderson was our director. They were really talented. Scott Bradley was my partner. You really
Former
talented
Princeton
people.
coach.
Yeah, it was a pro broadcast. Anyway, we won as a group. I have the Emmy over here, and I know I did a good job of the pre and post game shows, but I think my dedication, kind of shined through there because I didn't go to the awards. It was pretty cool. Lou Tilley accepted for us. I really didn't know who Lou was at that point, but I came to find out that, he was part of the CN8 family and really had helped grow it. But it was pretty cool.
Tom McCarthy, Phillies broadcaster, joining us here on Bracy Sports Media. All right, Tom, so the rest is kind of history. You joined the Phillies. You left for the Mets for a couple seasons, came back, and you're obviously well known now in what you do. I want to throw a couple dates at you and tell me what you remember about these. The first one is June 27th, 2014. Do you remember what you did on that date? You were out in the outfield at Citizens Bank Park.
Oh, yeah. I have pictures of it over here. That was I talked to Kyle Kendrick the other day, and we were talking about that a little bit. So we're out in center field, and we're broadcasting the game, and I actually caught a ball off the bat of Freddie Freeman, which is the funniest thing in the world because we had sat out there, Aaron, I had sat there for 3 days during BP to kind of gauge the pitches and stuff like that, and nothing came close. And there we are in the first inning, and the ball came out. The glove was on the table. I picked it up, put it on, and I'm thinking, please don't miss this. That was pretty sweet.
The other moment, which has to be kind of bittersweet, was April 13th, 2009. What do you remember about that day? That was the day that Harry passed, and you sort of took over for him.
Yeah, so I had come back from the Mets after only 2 years. I had planned on being in New York because, I was doing the whole game on radio, and I had planned on being there. I didn't plan on coming back to Philadelphia because I was sort of getting an opportunity in New York. And middle of my second year, the conversation started about maybe coming back to do television. I hadn't done a whole lot of TV except for the Thunder stuff. Anyway, the plan was that I was coming back to replace Harry when he retired, whenever that was going to be, 10 years down the road, just to have another voice in the TV booth. And that day is the worst day we have ever had in our Phillies broadcasting history. I mean, it's the worst day. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, not only because of the fact that we had to present the news when we went on the air, and a lot of people knew at that point, but just the fact that our leader was gone. I mean, Harry was the best. I mean, when I left, he called. He was one of the first people that called. When I came back, he was the first person that called and was so excited that I came back. But he wasn't feeling great that day when we got to the ballpark, and it was the opening day for the Nationals, home opener for the Nationals. And, he and I were writing the lineups down. He said, all right, T-Mac, let me know if there's anything that changes. Because I can't remember who it was. Somebody was nicked up, and Charlie may have was thinking about changing the lineup. So I said, okay, Harry, I'll see you in a little bit. He went upstairs in D.C., and it's pretty high up there. And about 20 minutes later, we got word that he had collapsed. And at that point, it was 9:30 in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning. We weren't sure if we were going to play. We just were hoping he was okay.
Right.
We received word as he was going to the ballpark that he wasn't okay, but they were hoping that they were going to be able to revive him. And then about 40 minutes later is when we found out that he had passed. And it was, it was hard because we had to go on with the game.
Right.
Stan Kasten asked the organization if they wanted to postpone it. He would have. But David Montgomery, and I think he was right about this. I know he was right about this. Harry wouldn't have wanted that. He would have wanted the game to go on. So we went on live, no scripts, and told everybody in the Delaware Valley that, the greatest broadcaster, the most beloved sports figure in the last 50 years in Philadelphia, I mean, I truly believe that, had passed away. And that was hard because I looked to my partners, and, Chris Wheeler's known Harry since Harry came to the Phillies. Right. They were close friends. He was hurting, and Sarge was crying. Sarge had just lost his mom, and that sort of, made things a little worse. So anyway, it was a tough day, and we miss him every day. I mean, I'm so happy he got to call the 08 World Championship. So happy. Wish he would have called the Halladay perfect game. Wish he would have called Jimmy becoming the all-time hits leader. I mean, all those things deserved and needed his voice, and it was a hard day.
Last thing, Tom, and I just want to say this as a compliment to you, is that from the moment that I met you until now, where when I first met you, people outside of Mercer County probably didn't know who you are. Now everyone knows who you are, but you've always been the same person, and you've always treated me the same way, always kind and welcoming whenever I see you, never big time me ever. And I read that you said that you try to be the same person on the air and off the air. And I was just wondering if you could address that in your style of broadcasting.
Well, the style of broadcasting, I think, is, and thank you, Aaron, for saying that. I really appreciate that. And, it means a lot. But the style of broadcasting has evolved over the years. I don't try to be anybody else. I really don't, because you can't. And I think that if you try to be somebody else on the air, somebody's going to figure it out. They're going to say, that guy's fake. So I just try to be who I am on the air, who I am off the air. I smile a lot. I like what I do. I like the people that I'm around. You know, David Montgomery and my dad probably have had the two biggest influences on me when it comes to dealing with people. But I also think the people in the Trenton Thunder organization did as well, because, you know, they taught me how important it was for me to see and appreciate what the folks at the grounds crew do, what the folks at the concession stands do, what the ushers do. And I think that responsibility that I had at the Thunder really, you know, gave me, it embraced that in my mind. But I want everybody around us. It doesn't matter who they are. It could be Mr. Breen, who scans us when we come into the press box. You know, it could be Ed and Alex in the press box. It could be Sharon and everybody else in the lunchroom. I want them to know that if not for them, we wouldn't have the environment that we have at the Phillies organization. You know, my crew is that way. I don't know. It's important to me to recognize the talents and the abilities of everybody that is around us, because without them, we couldn't do what we're going to do.
Tom McCarthy, Phillies broadcaster. Until the games come back, you can find Tom on 10 Minutes with T-Mac on the Phillies YouTube channel, and also on the weekends on Saturdays on NBC Sports Philly with the simulation games. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Aaron, thank you. Thanks for doing all this, too. I think it's great that you have people have a chance to have a sports outlet, and this is a good spot for them to get that outlet.
Thanks so much, Tom. And if you like our videos, you can also download our podcast wherever you get your podcast on Bracy Sports Media. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day, everyone.